My name is Magnolia Rose Henderson. I'm 29 years old, and I just watched my sister Dahlia get carried away in an ambulance after my prize hornets delivered the most poetic justice I've ever witnessed. What started as a peaceful morning checking my beehives turned into the moment that would finally expose 15 years of systematic family sabotage. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very creatures she'd tried to destroy became the instruments of her downfall. But to understand how we got here, how my own blood sister nearly cost me everything I'd built, you need to know the whole twisted story. Hey everyone, before we dive into this wild family revenge saga, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers worldwide. If you're ready for a story that'll have you questioning everything about family loyalty, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because this hornet's nest of family drama is about to get absolutely insane. Trust me, you won't see this ending coming. Growing up in rural Georgia, Dahlia and I were supposed to be each other's closest allies. Our parents, Martha and James Henderson, owned a modest 100-acre farm that barely kept us afloat. While other kids played video games, we were hauling hay bales and mending fences. The work was backbreaking, but it taught us resilience. At least, I thought it taught both of us resilience. Dahlia was always the golden child. 3 years older, effortlessly beautiful with her platinum blonde hair and emerald eyes that could charm anyone within seconds. She had this magnetic personality that drew people in, making them feel like they were the most important person in the world. Teachers adored her boys, followed her around like lost puppies, and our parents constantly held her up as the example I should follow. Meanwhile, I was the awkward younger sister with frizzy auburn hair and freckles covering every inch of my face. While Dahlia was homecoming queen and valedictorian, I spent my free time reading agriculture journals and learning about sustainable farming practices. She called me a dirt worshipper and constantly reminded me that I'd never amount to anything without her guidance. When I turned 18, something shifted. I'd saved every penny from my part-time job at the local feed store and applied for agricultural grants without telling anyone. The day my acceptance letter arrived for the University of Georgia's agricultural program, along with a full scholarship, Dahlia's mask slipped for just a moment. I saw something in her eyes that terrified me. Pure, undiluted hatred. "You think you're so smart," she whispered that night when our parents weren't around. "You think you can just waltz out of here and become something special. You're nothing without this family, Magnolia. Nothing." I brushed it off as sibling rivalry, but over the next 4 years, strange things started happening. My scholarship paperwork mysteriously went missing twice, forcing me to scramble to resubmit everything. My laptop crashed the night before major presentations, wiping months of research. Internship opportunities that seemed guaranteed suddenly evaporated without explanation. But I persevered. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in agricultural science and a specialization in apiculture, bee farming. The professors were amazed by my innovative research on hornets and their role in pest control. I'd discovered that certain hornet species could be domesticated and used to protect crops naturally, eliminating the need for harmful pesticides. After graduation, I returned home with a business plan that would revolutionize our family farm. I'd secured investors who believed in my vision of sustainable, profitable agriculture. The plan was to transform our struggling 100 acres into a premier organic farm and apiary, projecting profits of over $2 million within 5 years. Dahlia had stayed local, bouncing between dead-end jobs and toxic relationships. She'd developed a serious drinking problem and had been arrested twice for drunk driving. Our parents were worried sick about her, constantly bailing her out of financial troubles while praising my accomplishments. The night I presented my business plan to our family, Dahlia sat in stony silence. When I finished explaining how my hornet research could transform our farm into a profitable enterprise, she stood up slowly. "This is all very impressive, little sister," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "But you're forgetting one tiny detail. Mom and Dad promised me I'd inherit this farm when they retire. You can take your fancy insects and your college degree and find somewhere else to play farmer." My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. Dad cleared his throat nervously. Well, we haven't actually made any final decisions about inheritance. That's when I realized the scope of Dahlia's manipulation. For years, she'd been working behind the scenes, poisoning our parents against me, while positioning herself as the responsible daughter who'd stayed close to home. Every family dinner I'd missed, due to studying, every holiday I'd spent working on research projects, she'd twisted into evidence that I didn't care about the family farm. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Everything suddenly made sense. The missing paperwork, the technical failures, the mysterious loss of opportunities. Dahlia hadn't been content with just being the favorite. She'd actively sabotaged my success to ensure I'd never threaten her position as heir to the farm. But I'd learned something valuable during my years away at university: how to think strategically. Instead of confronting her directly or having an emotional breakdown, I excused myself from the dinner table and spent the next 3 hours in my childhood bedroom formulating a plan. The next morning, I approached my parents with a different proposition. Instead of asking for inheritance rights, I offered to lease a 50-acre section of the farm for my apiary business. I'd pay them fair market rent, improve the land value with my operations, and they could maintain ownership while generating steady income. It was a win-win situation that didn't threaten Dahlia's inheritance claims. My parents were thrilled with the arrangement. Within 6 months, I'd established Henderson apiaries, complete with over 200 beehives and 3 specialized hornet colonies that I'd carefully cultivated for pest control. The operation was more successful than even my most optimistic projections. Local farmers were paying premium prices for my organic honey and my hornet pest control services. Dahlia seemed satisfied with this arrangement initially. She got to maintain her position as the favored daughter and future farm owner, while I was safely contained to my little bug business that she could dismiss as a quirky hobby. For almost 2 years, we maintained an uneasy peace. But as my business grew, so did the recognition. Agricultural journals featured my innovative hornet research. I was invited to speak at farming conferences across the Southeast. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about my success, calling me Georgia's Bee Whisperer. Most importantly, my annual income had exceeded 6 figures, and I was on track to become a millionaire within 5 years. That's when Dahlia's jealousy reached a dangerous new level. It started with small acts of sabotage. I'd find my hive tools missing or mysteriously damaged. Gates to my apiary sections would be left open, allowing livestock to wander through and disturb the colonies. Sugar water I'd prepared for feeding weak hives would be contaminated with salt, which could kill entire colonies. I installed security cameras after the 3rd incident, but Dahlia was clever. She never appeared on camera herself. Instead, she'd recruit her latest boyfriend or drinking buddies to do her dirty work, always with plausible cover stories about accidentally damaging my equipment. The breaking point came when I discovered she'd been spreading rumors about my business practices throughout the county. She told people I was using dangerous chemicals, that my hornets were attacking neighboring farms, that my organic certification was fraudulent. 3 major contracts were canceled based on these lies, costing me nearly $50,000 in lost revenue. When I confronted her about the rumors, she laughed in my face. "Prove it," she said, taking a long swig from her ever-present beer bottle. "Prove I said anything about your precious bugs. You always were paranoid, Magnolia. Maybe that's why you never had any real friends growing up." That night, I made a decision that would change everything. If Dahlia wanted to play dirty, I'd show her what real strategy looked like. But I wasn't going to stoop to her level of petty sabotage. Instead, I was going to use the very thing she was trying to destroy, my hornets, to expose her true nature once and for all. I began documenting everything meticulously. Every act of sabotage, every lie she spread, every piece of equipment that mysteriously broke. I set up additional hidden cameras that she didn't know about, ones that could capture audio as well as video. I started recording our conversations on my phone whenever she made threats or cruel comments. Most importantly, I began studying Dahlia's patterns of behavior. She was predictable in her unpredictability, always escalating her attacks when she felt threatened or when I achieved new success. I'd recently received notification that I'd won a prestigious Agricultural Innovation Award worth $25,000, and I knew she'd make her move soon. The weapon I'd use against her was already in place. My prize colony of Georgia giant hornets, the most protective and intelligent insects I'd ever worked with. These weren't ordinary hornets, they were the result of 3 years of careful breeding and training. They knew my scent, my voice, my movements. More importantly, they could distinguish between friend and foe with remarkable accuracy. I just needed to wait for Dahlia to make her biggest mistake yet. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Word had gotten out about my Agricultural Innovation Award, and suddenly everyone in town was talking about little Magnolia Henderson and her incredible success. The local bank approved my application for a business expansion loan worth $500,000. 3 major organic food distributors reached out about exclusive contracts that would triple my annual income. For the first time in my life, I was genuinely happy and confident about my future. I'd proven that my childhood dreams weren't just naive fantasies. They were achievable goals that I'd turned into reality through hard work and determination. But Dahlia couldn't stand seeing me succeed. The first sign of escalation came when I found my prize-breeding queen bee dead in her hive, clearly poisoned. This wasn't random vandalism or accidental damage. This was a deliberate attack, designed to cripple my entire operation. A queen bee represents months of careful cultivation and thousands of dollars in lost productivity. Killing her was like burning down someone's house. I knew immediately that Dahlia was responsible, but I needed proof. So I did something that would seem crazy to most people. I began treating this like a criminal investigation, rather than a family dispute. I called my college roommate Jessica, who'd become a forensic investigator for the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Without revealing the family connection, I explained that someone was systematically sabotaging my business and asked for advice on gathering evidence that would hold up in court. Magnolia, this sounds like criminal harassment at minimum, possibly felony destruction of property depending on the total damages, Jessica said during our phone call. You need to document everything with dates, times, photos, and monetary losses. If this person is escalating their behavior, they're going to make a mistake eventually. Following Jessica's advice, I created a detailed incident log with photographic evidence and financial impact assessments. I also reached out to my insurance company to understand what would be covered if someone destroyed my entire operation. The conversation was eye-opening. My business was now valued at over $800,000, and a complete loss could potentially be prosecuted as a felony. Meanwhile, I began quietly building alliances with people who'd witnessed Dahlia's behavior over the years. Our cousin Marcus, who worked at the local feed store, confirmed that Dahlia had been asking detailed questions about bee colony management, and specifically about what substances could harm hornets. The hardware store owner, Mr. Peterson, remembered her purchasing rat poison just days before my queen bee died. Most importantly, I reconnected with our childhood neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood, who'd known our family for over 30 years. Eleanor was in her 70s but sharp as a tack, and she'd always been fond of me. When I visited her under the pretense of selling honey, she revealed something that changed my entire understanding of the family dynamic. Your sister's been coming around here lately, Eleanor said, pouring sweet tea on her front porch as we watched the sunset. Asking strange questions about your business, wanting to know my thoughts on who should inherit your parents' farm. She seems to think you're planning to cheat her out of her rightful inheritance. I nearly choked on my tea. Mrs. Eleanor, I've never expressed any interest in inheriting the farm. I'm perfectly happy with my lease arrangement. Eleanor's weathered face creased with concern. That's what I told her, dear. But she's got this idea in her head that you're manipulating your parents with your success, trying to make her look bad by comparison. She said some very unkind things about you, things I won't repeat because they're not fit for decent conversation. This conversation revealed the true scope of Dahlia's delusion. In her mind, my success wasn't just threatening her position as the golden child. It was an active conspiracy to steal her inheritance and humiliate her publicly. She'd constructed an elaborate narrative where I was the villain and she was the victim, which justified increasingly extreme measures to defend herself. That night, I made a decision that would prove crucial in the coming confrontation. I called my parents and arranged a family meeting for the following Sunday. I told them I had some important announcements about my business expansion and wanted to share my plans with everyone at once. What I didn't tell them was that I'd also invited Jessica to visit that weekend, ostensibly as a college friend, stopping by for a casual visit. I'd positioned several new security cameras around my apiary, including one with night vision capabilities focused on my prize hornet colony. Most importantly, I'd spent weeks conditioning my Georgia giant hornets to respond to a specific whistle pattern: 3 short bursts, followed by 2 long ones. If Dahlia was planning to destroy my operation, she'd have to go through my hornets to do it, and I was counting on their protective instincts to finally expose her true nature to our entire family. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just the future of my business, but the entire dynamic of our family. Dahlia had spent years positioning herself as the victim of my success, but she was about to discover that sometimes the prey is actually the predator in disguise. I just had to wait for her to make her move, and trust that justice would be served by the very creatures she was trying to destroy. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of oppressive Georgia heat that makes everything feel thick and dangerous. I woke up before dawn to check on my hornets, knowing that today would either vindicate everything I'd worked for, or destroy it completely. The Georgia giant hornets were more active than usual, sensing the tension in the air with that uncanny intelligence that had made them such effective guardians. Jessica arrived around 9, playing her role as the casual college friend perfectly. She admired my operation with genuine enthusiasm, while discreetly noting the security camera positions and evidence I'd accumulated. My parents bustled around preparing Sunday dinner, excited to hear about my business expansion plans. Dahlia showed up late, already halfway through a beer, despite the early hour. She'd brought her latest boyfriend, a sketchy character named Rick, who owed money to half the county and had a reputation for petty theft. The moment I saw them together, I knew this was it. She was planning something big and had recruited muscle to help her execute it. During dinner, I announced my expansion plans with carefully calculated enthusiasm. The new distributor contracts the $500,000 loan approval, my projection of reaching $2 million in annual revenue within 3 years. I watched Dahlia's face carefully as each piece of news landed like a physical blow. "That's wonderful, honey," Mom said, beaming with pride. "You've built something truly special here." "It's impressive how far you've come," Dad added. "Who would have thought our little Magnolia would become such a successful businesswoman?" Dahlia's knuckles went white around her beer bottle. "Yeah, it's amazing what some people can accomplish when they abandon their family responsibilities," she said, her voice tight, with barely controlled rage. The table went silent. Jessica caught my eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. She'd heard the threat underlying Dahlia's words. "I've never abandoned anything," I replied calmly. "I'm paying fair rent for my land use, I visit regularly, and I've brought positive attention to our family name through my work." "Positive attention," Dahlia laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call stealing the spotlight from everyone else, making the rest of us look like failures by comparison?" "Dahlia, that's enough," Dad said firmly. "Your sister's success doesn't diminish your value." But I could see it was too late. Dahlia had reached that dangerous point, where alcohol and resentment combined into pure destructive impulse. She excused herself abruptly, claiming she needed fresh air, and Rick followed her outside. Through the kitchen window, I watched them walking toward my apiary section, and my heart started racing. This was it, the moment I'd been preparing for. I excused myself to use the bathroom and quickly texted Jessica, "It's happening, get your camera ready." When I stepped outside, I could hear Dahlia's voice carrying across the yard, pitched high with drunken fury. She was standing near my prize hornet colony, the one that housed my Georgia giants, gesticulating wildly as she explained something to Rick. "Think she's so smart with her fancy bugs," she was saying. "Well, let's see how smart she feels when her precious hornets are all dead." All it takes is one spray can of poison and her whole operation comes crashing down. Rick looked nervous. I don't know, Dahlia. Those things look dangerous. They're just insects, she snapped. Big dumb insects. Magnolia's been filling everyone's heads with nonsense about how special they are, but they're nothing but glorified wasps. That's when I stepped out from behind the equipment shed where I'd been listening. Actually, they're quite a bit more than that. Dahlia spun around, nearly losing her balance. Her face was flushed red from alcohol and anger. There she is, the little spy. Always lurking around, always watching. I was watching because I knew you were planning something, I said, keeping my voice steady. Just like you've been sabotaging my business for months. Just like you killed my breeding queen last week. Prove it, she snarled, echoing her response from our previous confrontation. You can't prove anything because you're just a paranoid little freak who thinks the world revolves around her precious bugs. But this time I had proof. Jessica had been recording from the kitchen window, capturing both audio and video of Dahlia's confession. My security cameras were running continuously. Most importantly, Rick was looking increasingly uncomfortable with the situation, clearly recognizing that he'd been recruited for something that could land him in serious legal trouble. You know what your problem is, Magnolia. Dahlia continued, pulling a can of industrial-strength insecticide from her purse. You think you're better than everyone else. You think your college degree and your fancy business make you special. But you're still just the weird little girl who played with bugs, while normal kids had friends. She raised the spray can toward my prize hornet colony, and that's when I did something that would have seemed insane to anyone who didn't understand the relationship I'd built with these creatures. I whistled. 3 short bursts, followed by 2 long ones. The response was immediate and terrifying. 43 Georgia giant hornets emerged from their hive in perfect formation, their wings creating a sound like an approaching helicopter. But they didn't attack randomly. They'd been trained to identify threats to their colony. And Dahlia, holding a poison spray can and approaching their home with obvious hostile intent, registered as the primary target. Rick took one look at the approaching swarm and ran. He was halfway to the road before Dahlia even realized what was happening. The hornets circled Dahlia in a tight formation, their buzzing growing louder and more aggressive. These weren't ordinary wasps acting on instinct. They were intelligent creatures who understood that this person represented a direct threat to their survival. Call them off, Dahlia screamed, dropping the spray can and waving her arms frantically. Magnolia, call them off right now! But I didn't need to call them off, because they weren't attacking her. They were doing exactly what I'd trained them to do. Contain the threat until help arrived. The hornets maintained their circle, preventing her from moving toward the hive or picking up the poison spray, but they weren't stinging her. That changed when Dahlia, in her panic and rage, grabbed a fallen tree branch and started swinging it at the hornets. The first hornet that got hit released a pheromone signal that instantly changed the entire dynamic. These creatures had just watched their family member be attacked, and their response was swift and decisive. Within seconds, Dahlia was covered in hornets, delivering precisely targeted stings designed to incapacitate rather than kill. She went down hard, screaming and flailing as the hornets administered what could only be described as natural justice. By the time our parents and Jessica reached the scene, Dahlia was unconscious on the ground, her body covered in welts, but her vital signs stable. The hornets, their job complete, returned to their hive as calmly as they'd emerged. The ambulance arrived within 12 minutes, followed closely by the sheriff's department. As the paramedics worked on Dahlia, loading her onto a stretcher while monitoring her vital signs, I found myself in the surreal position of having to explain to my parents and law enforcement why my sister had been attacking my beehives with industrial poison. Sheriff Williams had known our family for years, and he listened with growing amazement as Jessica presented the video evidence she'd captured. The recording clearly showed Dahlia confessing to months of sabotage, threatening to destroy my colony, and approaching the hives with obvious intent to cause damage. Well, I'll be damned, the sheriff muttered, watching the footage for the 3rd time. That's premeditated destruction of property right there. And with the value of this operation, He looked around at my extensive apiary setup with new appreciation. We're talking felony charges. My parents stood in stunned silence as the full scope of Dahlia's behavior became clear. The evidence Jessica and I presented painted a picture of systematic harassment, spanning nearly 2 years with financial damages exceeding $75,000. The poisoned queen bee alone represented a loss of $15,000 in breeding potential and colony productivity. "I don't understand," Mom whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Why would she do this? Magnolia never did anything to hurt her." Dad's reaction was more complex. I could see him mentally reviewing years of family dynamics, recognizing patterns he'd previously dismissed as normal sibling rivalry. "The missing scholarship papers," he said slowly. "The technical problems you had in college. Dahlia always seemed to know about your setbacks before we did." That's when Rick reappeared, escorted by a deputy who'd found him hiding behind the gas station 2 miles down the road. Faced with the possibility of being charged as an accessory to felony destruction of property, Rick immediately started talking. "She's been planning this for weeks," he blurted out, clearly desperate to save himself. "She said her sister was trying to steal the family farm with her bug business, that she needed to level the playing field. She bought that poison spray last Tuesday and made me promise to help her spray all the hives today." "She told you to spray occupied beehives?" Jessica asked, her investigator instincts kicking in. "Did she mention that hornet stings could be potentially fatal?" Rick's face went pale. "She said they were just regular bees. Said they might sting a little but wouldn't really hurt anyone. She never said anything about giant hornets or how dangerous they could be." This revelation added a new dimension to the charges Dahlia would face. Not only had she planned to destroy my business, but she'd recklessly endangered Rick's life by downplaying the dangers involved. Georgia giant hornets were significantly more aggressive and venomous than regular honeybees, and an unprepared person could easily have been killed. The paramedic team leader approached us with an update on Dahlia's condition. "She's stable, but experiencing severe allergic reactions to multiple stings. We're transporting her to Atlanta General for specialized treatment." The good news is that most of the stings were on her extremities, avoiding vital areas. "Will she face permanent damage?" Dad asked, his voice heavy with worry, despite everything she'd done. "Hard to say at this point," the paramedic replied. The hornets showed remarkable precision in their attack pattern. Almost like they were trying to incapacitate, rather than kill. "I've never seen anything quite like it." I caught Jessica's eye and saw her slight smile. She understood what I'd accomplished with my hornet training better than anyone else. These creatures hadn't attacked out of random aggression. They'd responded to a genuine threat, with exactly the level of force necessary to neutralize it. As the ambulance pulled away, Sheriff Williams turned to address the remaining family members. "Given the evidence we've collected, I'll be filing charges against Dahlia Henderson for criminal trespass, destruction of property, and attempted vandalism. The total damages appear to exceed the felony threshold, so she's looking at serious jail time. She'll also face civil liability for the business losses," Jessica added. "Magnolia, you should contact your insurance company and your lawyer immediately. This kind of systematic harassment opens up possibilities for punitive damages, as well as recovery of actual losses." The weight of the situation finally hit our parents. Their golden child, the daughter they'd favored and protected for 32 years, was facing felony charges for trying to destroy her sister's livelihood out of pure jealousy. Everything they thought they knew about their family dynamic had been turned upside down in a single afternoon. Mom collapsed into Dad's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "How did we not see it? How did we let it get this far?" I felt a complex mix of emotions watching my parents' pain. Part of me wanted to comfort them, to minimize Dahlia's actions and preserve their illusions about family harmony. But I'd spent too many years being the family scapegoat, absorbing blame for problems I didn't create, while Dahlia's toxic behavior was excused and enabled. "You saw what you wanted to see," I said gently but firmly. "Dahlia was always good at playing the victim and making other people responsible for her problems. But her actions today were her choice, and the consequences are hers to face. As law enforcement finished their investigation and the crowd of neighbors and curious onlookers began to disperse, I found myself standing alone in my apiary, surrounded by the hives that had become both my life's work and my salvation. The Georgia giant hornets had returned to their normal activities, but I could sense their continued alertness, their protective energy still focused on guarding what we'd built together. For the first time in years, I felt truly safe on my own property. 6 months later, I stood in the same spot where Dahlia had tried to destroy everything I'd worked for, but the view had changed dramatically. My business expansion was complete with 3 additional hornet colonies and a state-of-the-art honey processing facility that attracted visitors from across the Southeast. The legal settlement from Dahlia's insurance company had provided the capital for improvements I'd only dreamed about before. Dahlia spent 4 months in jail and was ordered to pay restitution totaling $93,000 for the damage she'd caused over 2 years of sabotage. The judge was particularly harsh because of the premeditated nature of her attacks and the reckless endangerment of Rick's life. Her criminal record made it impossible for her to find decent employment locally, and she eventually moved to Florida to live with our Aunt Margaret. The most surprising development was how the incident had affected our parents. Instead of defending Dahlia's behavior or trying to minimize her actions, they'd undergone what could only be described as a complete awakening about family dynamics. Dad started attending therapy sessions to understand how he'd enabled Dahlia's manipulation for so many years. Mom joined a support group for parents of adult children with substance abuse problems. "We owe you an apology that's about 20 years overdue," Dad said during one of our weekly dinners. "We were so focused on managing Dahlia's problems that we took your stability and success for granted. That wasn't fair to either of you, and it created the dynamic that led to all this destruction." My relationship with my parents had actually grown stronger after the confrontation. Without Dahlia's constant manipulation and drama consuming their attention, they were finally able to appreciate the daughter who'd quietly built something remarkable, while asking for nothing but basic respect and support. The business continued to thrive beyond my wildest projections. Agricultural universities were sending students to study my hornet management techniques. 3 major organic food companies had offered to buy my operation for amounts that would make me financially independent for life. But I wasn't interested in selling. This was my calling. My contribution to sustainable farming practices that could benefit communities across the country. Jessica had become more than just a college friend who'd helped during a crisis. She'd become my closest confidant and business advisor. Her investigative skills and my agricultural expertise made for a powerful combination, and we'd started consulting with other farmers who were dealing with systematic sabotage or harassment. "You know what I find most fascinating about the whole situation," Jessica said as we walked through the expanded apiary on a crisp autumn morning. "Your hornets didn't just defend themselves, they administered exactly the right amount of justice to match the crime. Dahlia tried to destroy them with poison, so they delivered consequences that were painful but not permanently damaging." She was right. The hornet stings had caused Dahlia significant discomfort and required medical treatment, but they hadn't left lasting physical damage. It was as if the creatures had understood the concept of proportional response better than most humans do. The incident had also brought unexpected recognition to my work. National Geographic featured my hornet research in an article about innovative pest control methods. The Discovery Channel was interested in filming a documentary about my techniques. Most importantly, the USDA had approved my methods for organic certification, opening up markets I'd never imagined accessing. But perhaps the most meaningful change was the sense of peace I felt every morning when I walked among my hives. For years I'd been looking over my shoulder waiting for the next act of sabotage or family drama to disrupt my work. Now protected by my hornets and validated by my success, I could focus entirely on the future I was building. The property that had once been just 50 leased acres had expanded to include 200 acres that my parents had decided to sell to me at below market rates. They'd recognized that I was the child who truly understood the value of the land and had the vision to make it prosper for generations to come. Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood had become like a grandmother to me, stopping by weekly to check on my progress and share stories about the old days when farming was simpler but less profitable. She'd witnessed the entire transformation of our family dynamic and often marveled at how justice had ultimately prevailed. "Your sister spent so many years trying to tear you down," Eleanor observed during one of her visits, "but all she accomplished was proving that you're stronger than she ever imagined. Those hornets didn't save you, dear. You saved yourself. They just helped deliver the message." As I prepared for another day of working with my colonies, checking honey production levels and monitoring the health of my expanding hornet populations, I reflected on the lessons this experience had taught me. Family isn't just about blood relationships. It's about mutual respect, support, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Sometimes, the people who share your DNA are the ones who wish you the most harm, while strangers become your strongest allies. The hornets had taught me that protection comes in many forms. Sometimes it's the ability to defend yourself against direct attack. Sometimes it's the wisdom to document evidence and build alliances before confrontation becomes inevitable. And sometimes it's simply the confidence that comes from knowing you've built something valuable that no amount of jealousy or sabotage can truly destroy. My name is Magnolia Rose Henderson. I'm 30 years old, and I've learned that the sweetest revenge isn't getting even with people who try to hurt you. It's building a life so successful and fulfilling that their villain negativity becomes irrelevant. The hornets may have delivered the immediate justice that day, but the real victory was proving that hard work, integrity, and genuine expertise will always triumph over jealousy and sabotage in the long run. So here's my question for all of you who followed this wild journey of family betrayal and natural justice. Have you ever experienced that moment when karma finally caught up with someone who'd been making your life too miserable? Drop your own stories in the comments below. I love reading about how the universe delivers its own brand of justice. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with anyone who needs to hear that sometimes the people who try to destroy us end up destroying themselves instead. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life drama and life lessons from someone who's learned that the best revenge is always a life well lived. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, sometimes the smallest creatures can teach us the biggest lessons about standing up for ourselves and protecting what we've worked so hard to build.